Hi there and welcome.
You're listening to Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm.
My name is Avantika, and I'm a researcher exploring animal consciousness, environmental sustainability, and planetary health. I want to help bring animal perspectives to the table and transform our relationship with the natural world.
And I'm Barbara. I'm an animal communicator and retired veterinarian. My true passion is exploring the hearts and souls of animals and helping people come to a much deeper understanding of who the animals truly are at their core.
This podcast is for anyone who loves animals and nature and has an interest in their own personal and spiritual development. We'll bring you powerful conversations with fascinating people about animal and nature sentience, consciousness, and communication.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of love, respect, understanding, and care for the fellow beings who share our beautiful Mother Earth with us. Hi, everyone. I have a really wonderful special guest. Her name is Nancy Windheart, and she's been an animal communicator or intuitive telepathic communicator for about as long as I have, I think. She is an internationally recognized communicator and teacher for both lay people and those who wish to practice professionally. She's also a Reiki master teacher and a certified yoga teacher. Her life's work is to create deeper harmony between species through interspecies communion, connection, and communication, and to facilitate physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual healing and growth for both people and animals. Nancy's career started as a professional classical pianist, deeply immersed in the world of music, but over time, she realized that her true calling lay with the animals and that silent, profound communication that exists between species. This calling has taken her around the world to amazing places with many animals in the wild, experiencing firsthand the wisdom of African wildlife, dolphins, and especially the great whales, which we're going to focus on today because I have such a great love for these animals as well. These encounters weren't just personal, they became a way for her to guide others into a deeper connection with the natural world. And she's led groups on life-changing journeys to meet these magnificent beings in their natural habitats, offering people the opportunity to step into an ancient sacred dialogue with animals and nature. And I was reading some of the things that you sent me, Nancy, some of your many writings, and I found this quote that I would love to share because it's so beautiful and profound. It was from 2017, The Elders of the Seas. As we connect with the perspective, awareness, and consciousness of those who have never forgotten who they are, we begin to understand that our human role on this planet is both limited and limitless. We can't solve our problems from the state of awareness that created them. The whales and the wise ones of many species are inviting us to open into an entirely new way of knowing and perceiving, into a generative co-creation with all life. They are inviting us to remember who we are. I love that, Nancy. So thank you so much for being here with me today and with all of us.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And it's such it's really just such a joy to have conversations with a colleague and to be able to go back and forth with this deep understanding that we share. And I know that the shared passion and heart for what this work is and really what it means and who the animals are and what they have to share.
Yeah, thank you. I'm getting kind of emotional because it is really such a gift, to be with someone who works at that level and really understands who the animals are. So can you just talk briefly about how you started doing this work and what you were doing before this? What led you to become a communicator?
Yeah, I guess the place to start would be in my early life. Like many of us, my closest friends and companions as a child were animals, and they were not just family members, friends, but they were also beings who supported me and in certain ways saved me during some very difficult times in my early life. And they were always a part of my world. At a certain point, I realized that, like many children do, who have these deep connections and easy communication and connection with animals and trees and plants and all of the beings, that this wasn't necessarily something that was common or something, at least in my generation, that we could talk about freely with adults without being shut down or told it was just our imagination or all the things, right? And so I also was a musician and ended up taking that path in my professional life, studying classical music and teaching and performing. And at a certain point, I, well, I adopted my first dog as an adult, and that's really where it kind of all started. Because I started to volunteer. I was just finishing graduate school. It was difficult. It was a hard time in my life, and I started to volunteer at the shelter that I had adopted him from. And this would have been in the late, let me think, early 90s, I guess. And there was an animal communicator who happened to volunteer at the shelter. And I met her and I watched her work, and it just opened the door back up for me of, oh, I remember this. I remember what this is. Oh, and she happened to live in my neighborhood, and so we became friends. And she worked with my animals, and that's really what started it again for me. And so that it turned into a period of time in my life where I was working as a professional musician and a teacher and a professor and all of the things in that academic world. But I also had animal companions in my own family. And then I did a lot of volunteer work with shelters and rescues. And at the same time, then tried to learn and study everything that I could that was available about this animal communication thing. And there, so I read everything that was available at the time. And then at a certain point, it became clear to me that the animals were really pushing me and pulling me into deeper formal study. And so I began a period of training time then, while I was still working as a musician, but I was also doing animal communication training and practicing. And I never really imagined that it would become a second career. But at a certain point, as these things do, spirit and the animals just kind of moved me from out of the music world and into the animal communication world. And the practice just started growing, and it was clear to me that this was really where my heart was. And so that's kind of the abbreviated version of it. But that was, all of that began in the early 2000s. And so I've been working professionally now for, let's see, coming on close to 20 years, a little bit shy of 20 years at this point. So.
Well, when you were still in the music world and you were shifting into communication with animals, was that a difficult transition? I'm just speaking from my experience. It was a little earlier than that in the 90s, but coming from the world of science and medicine, it was a hard transition because this is not based on proof and logic and reasoning and scientific principles. And I'm wondering if the transition from the music world might have been easy because it's a more creative, intuitive kind of process, it would seem.
In certain ways, perhaps, but in other ways, no. And that may have something to do with the fact that I was in the classical music world and I was also in academic circles. And so the academic classical music world is very intellectually oriented. And while the intuitive, creative, expressive part of it is certainly there, it rides alongside of this very academic and intellectual, uh, in a certain way, um, non-intuitive kind of world, right? And so it's both and the classical music world is also quite competitive, and there's all of those aspects of it. So, in the sense that I had already cultivated this way of listening, what I would call deep listening, in as a musician, and deep contemplation of what the composer was trying to express when they wrote the music, and then what my role was as a performer in translating that expression. That's where I see the overlap, right, of the translating and the really feeling into what the composer was up to when they wrote whatever it was that they wrote, and then communicating the essence of that, filtered through, of course, my own perspective, my own awareness, my own uh, life experiences, all of that. So balancing that in much the same way that we do with interspecies communication, right? That I think made it easier, and it also I had cultivated a lifestyle that allowed me to do what I needed to do as a musician, which included a lot of quiet, a lot of alone time, a lot of discipline, a lot of uh, that way of being, of just myself with the instrument and listening. And so I think in that way also there's overlap. But in other ways, it was quite difficult. And most of the people who were my colleagues and friends in the music world probably thought I had really lost my mind when I made the shift and really left the music world and started doing this full time.
I know that one very well.
Yeah.
We're seen as crazy woo-woo lunatics, I think
Right.
sometimes.
Right.
But
Right.
it's changing. Don't you think it's
And
changed a lot in the last 5, 10 years,
it has
especially?
changed so much. It has changed so much. And there's so much more awareness, both in the general public and then also in the academic and scientific communities. And, really, I mean, I think about the number of veterinarians and veterinary professionals, veterinary nurses, who are coming and seeking training through my classes now, right?
Oh,
And
wonderful.
and
That's
that
great.
that's you and I both have been involved with the research through the University of Saskatchewan and that project, and then all of the other research projects that are happening now. There's just this explosion of understanding and interest, and it's a really exciting time to be in the field because I think it really is moving into more of a mainstream awareness and a mainstream acceptance. And I no longer assume that when I tell people what I do, they're going to look at me, with a look of wondering if I'm a little bit off my rocker or way out there in the woo-woo field, because so many more people have an understanding and awareness of this now.
Yeah, very exciting. And the project that Avantika is starting is
Right.
super exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
actually give some, I think she's going to just be giving some validation to this whole field
Yes.
and deepening it. So,
Yes.
yes. So, that's great. And after you did your training and learning to be a communicator, you spent, what was it, about 10 years traveling all over the world to be with animals in the wild. To me, that's so fascinating and exciting. Do you want to just talk about what that was like and maybe where you went and what you did?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it kind of, I didn't set out to do it in that way, but that's kind of how it evolved. And yeah, it was a period of about 10 years where I really felt deeply called to particularly be with whales and dolphins, with our cetacean kin, cetacean brothers and sisters. And it was an immense privilege to be able to go to some of these places. And some of them were trips that I facilitated with groups and did teaching as part of the experience. Some of them were things that I did with colleagues, friends. A couple of them were things that I did just on my own. I would just get what I call that intuitive telepathic tickle, that call of I got to go to this, I got to go to this place and spend time in person with these particular beings. And so it took me everywhere from the Silver Bank, which is about 80 miles off the coast of the Dominican Republic in the Caribbean, where the Atlantic humpback whales come to mate and to have their young, to the Pacific coast off Baja, Mexico, Baja California, Mexico, with the gray whales and the incredible migration that they do and the incredible work that they do with humans in those locations. I traveled also to Canada, to Quebec, to be with the St. Lawrence beluga, and also went way up north to a research station where they're working with all the whale species in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So blue whales, fin whales, right whales, humpbacks, uh, all of the cetacean species there. And then the wonderful Atlantic spotted dolphins in Bimini, in the Bahamas, who are just an extraordinary group of beings, and so much fun to be with. So that that kind of that's kind of the summary. Also, the Sea of Cortez in Mexico, where the blue whales come in the winter for their migration and their all of what they do in that area. So yeah, it's been an extraordinary. Uh, all of them have been extraordinary experiences, and I've been on pause with it since just a little bit before the pandemic. The pandemic helped with the pause, but I'm not ruling out doing that again. But in these last few years, I stayed a little bit closer to home and have been working on some other projects, including just trying to really integrate and then write about what I learned and some of what those experiences have been like.
My God, there's a lot. I want to hear about all of it. And I mean, I've been with humpbacks, but
Yeah.
there, from what I understand and what I have understood, is there are only two places in the world where you can actually swim with the humpbacks, and one is the Dominican Republic, and the other's Tonga. And I
Yeah.
went to Tonga, and you went to Dominican Republic. Now, when I went to Tonga, this was 2007. I only had one swim in the water actually with the whales because there were researchers that were darting them before we got there. And so they were a little afraid. They weren't as used to humans as what you have described in the Dominican Republic. So I'd love to know more about what that was like, what that place is like, and what your connection was, what you learned, all that.
Yeah. Yeah, I had the privilege of being there several times. And so the Silver Bank is about 80 miles offshore, and it's in a protected coral reef area. And it is an internationally protected marine mammal sanctuary that is, I think I have this right. It's basically administered by the Dominican Republic because it's in their waters, but it's internationally protected. And so there is a very strict permitting system that only allows a certain number of authorized boats and carrying a certain very small number of passengers to go at any particular time. And so what that and it's quite a long journey. So you leave from shore. Generally, they leave in the evening and travel overnight. It's about around a 10-hour journey from the port out to the Silver Bank, and not an easy journey.
On a
Generally,
boat.
it can be very, very high seas, and you're on a small boat, a dive boat, and then you stay out on that boat for the week. And then there are smaller boats that they have. And depending on the operator, either they're like Zodiac style boats, or they're just like smaller, boats that hold maybe 10 or 12 people that you actually take out to be with the whales. And so, but you're anchored out for a whole week in the middle of the ocean. And it's just extraordinary because there's humpbacks everywhere. And this is the place, because it's a protected coral reef, that it's warm, it's shallow, it's a perfect place for the whales to mate, to have their young, to nurture their young until they're old enough to migrate back north. And many of the humpbacks that come to the Silver Bank are those who are very well known and studied by researchers all up the east coast of the United States. And so it's a population that is very well studied and continues to be studied. And so, because there is not a lot of interference, and because the regulations have been very strict and very respectful of the whales, there has developed a comfort with having the small number of boats and the small number of humans in their presence. And the operators are all very strict about following the regulations, which is that basically everything happens on the whale's terms. And so the whales choose whether or not they want to engage with the humans, and the humans' role is only to just be in the water in a very quiet, respectful way. And what that has created over the years is this very beautiful possibility for interaction and connection between the whales and people who are there. And so my experience has been that it's just been extraordinary. I mean, we've had encounters where we've been in the water just basically floating. There's not a lot of swimming, right? It's just basically snorkeling and floating. Diving is not allowed except for people who have special permits, either for research or limited videography. But for regular lay people like myself, there's no diving allowed. So it's only snorkeling. And and generally, the groups that I've been with, we have really tried to cultivate as a group a very meditative, uh, respectful kind of attitude where we hang together in a very quiet and meditative kind of way. And then the whales can just come and go as they wish. And so, we've had encounters where we've been in the water for hours with them, where they just hang out. Moms will bring their babies. They'll let the babies come and check out the humans and swim around and underneath and over. And the moms just kind of hang out, and it's just an extraordinary experience. And it's one of the things that I have been the most touched by is, of course, the awareness of these incredible beings, who they are, what they know, the energy that they are able to hold and to transmit, and the way that they open their energy field and their hearts and their awareness to include and be with humans. It's really it's beyond anything. It's been life-changing for me. It's so humbling. And so many times I've just come up out of the water just in tears because it's such an incredible gift and a blessing to be with these magnificent beings whose understanding is so much faster and so much deeper than ours. And they really transmit a kind of energy that is, what I would call a spiritual transmission or a spiritual blessing of connection, of understanding. And yeah, I could go on and on about it, Barbara. It's just an incredible thing to be with them.
I agree. Like I said, I didn't have as much experience with them in the water as you.
Mhm.
I was surrounded by them at times in Tonga and had a really beautiful encounter with a mother whale and her baby. And wrote about it afterwards when I wasn't in their presence. And their consciousness is so vast.
Yeah.
And they have it's amazing to me, and you and I have talked about this, the compassion they have for human beings who have done everything to destroy them for a long time, the whale hunting, and it was just horrendous. And yet they don't hold that. They're very, very forgiving and loving and open, which is quite amazing,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
wow, that
And of
was,
course, we don't need to be with them in person to be able to connect with them or communicate with them,
right.
right? But there obviously is, when you're that close in physical proximity to their vast consciousness and their energy field, right? And to be in their habitat with them, to be guests in their place, right? And to be included and welcomed into that. I remember one time that what's coming to me to share with you is we were with it was a mother and a baby and then a male whale. And the male was very gentle. And the mom and the baby were kind of over a little bit apart from where our group was. And the male whale came, and he came directly towards where I was just floating in the water. And I was a little bit apart from the rest of the group that I was with at this particular time. And he came right to where I was and came so close. And, it's a little bit, I was never afraid of them, but they're very, very big animals, right? They're, the
Yes.
size of a humpback whale is the size of a school bus, right? And, they're big and we're very, very little. And so there is that awareness when you're that close to them of like, oh my gosh, like this, I never felt frightened, but your heart does kind of go like beep, 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 right? Because, they're just so big. And of course, if they wanted to, they could hurt you very badly. They don't want to, right? But they're so careful with humans. And that's one of the things that's been so moving to me. And so this big guy came and he came right next to me and was maybe just a few feet away. And his big eye traveled along, and we looked at each other. And I just like I'm crying in my snorkel mask, right? And I'm just like, thank you and thank you. And he turned his body, he was so aware, he turned his body so that his pectoral fins, one went because those are the parts that if you get on the wrong side of a pectoral fin, you could really be hurt, right? And he was so aware, and he just turned his body so that his pec fin just went right under where I was, right? Because we were that
Oh,
close. And he knew that, okay, he needed to shift because what he was doing. And so he just turned and just moved that pec fin just maybe a foot or two underneath my body. And at one point, then as he came back up, it just lightly grazed my body. And then he went on. It was just an incredible thing to experience, and that sensitivity and that awareness and the connection that he made with me in that moment. so consciously and so gently and so precisely. I mean, it's something I will never forget as long as I live.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh my God. You know, I've heard a number of people say, "Aren't you afraid of those of those whales or even dolphins?" People
Mhm.
are smart. I won't. The first time I was with dolphins in the water, it was in Florida in a contained situation, and my mother was with me, and she wouldn't get in the water because they can be scary. But I've never been afraid either.
No.
Yeah, because they're so loving and conscious. They're totally conscious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, in those kinds, in a, situation where you're really in the wild with them and they are consciously making the choice whether or not to engage, right? That, you can trust that because there's no coercion of any kind. And there's plenty of, miles and miles and miles and miles of water to be in if they wanted to be someplace else, right?
Yeah.
And of course they can swim faster than any boat or right, and so if they choose to be with us in that way, from their own agency, from their own sovereignty, and making that choice in the way that they do, it's so humbling and so I mean, there's really no words
Yeah.
to express that. And yeah, I've never been afraid either, in any of those kinds of encounters. There's just
Yeah.
such a deep trust.
And speaking of big, you were with the blue whales, which are the largest of the whales. What was that like?
Boy, that's a whole other, yeah, it's a whole other experience. It's a whole other energy too. I have not been in the water with blue whales in the same way as with the humpbacks, because it's not really possible to do that. I mean, you can be in the same, you can be swimming in the same water that they're in, but they generally are not going to be engaging in that same way. But the place that I've spent most time with blue whales has been in the Sea of Cortez, and some of they come there in the winter months, and for all the reasons, to feed and to be together and mate and have their young and all of that. And so the population in the Sea of Cortez of blue whales is often quite high in the winter months. And so I've been there on kayak and camping trips, and we kayak. We go with a wonderful company out of Loreto called Sea Kayak Baja Mexico that takes people out into the it's a UNESCO marine mammal and protected World Heritage site. And so we kayak out and then camp on the islands, which are part of the sanctuary. And then you can also take small boats out to be near where the blue whales are. And because blue whales are so big, they are not as visible at the surface as humpbacks. They don't do the kinds of behaviors that humpbacks do, such as breaching and all of that, because their bodies don't allow them to do that. They're just gigantic. But so what you see from the surface of the water, you'll see them come up to breathe, and then if you're lucky, you'll also see the tail as it goes back down, right? But we've been in certain times and certain years, just again surrounded by them, and 10, 12, 15 blue whales at the same time. And it's interesting because scientists used to think that they were quite solitary creatures because they often would see them alone. And what they didn't realize until really they started learning and understanding more about them is that because of their size and because of the great speed at which they can travel, right? And that also the speed at which their vocalizations and their communication with each other, the way that that can travel, they're actually in connection with each other across vast distances, right? Of connection and communication and being in relationship with each other. So they are not at all solitary. But when they come in the Sea of Cortez, they are often in closer proximity to each other, especially in the years where there's a lot of them gathering. So that again, just being in that energy, being in there and in their energy field and connecting with them in that way is just magical. I remember one time we were camping on an island and a mother blue whale and her calf. I heard them in the middle of the night. When you hear their blows, there's nothing like it because I mean, when you see the blow, it's like 30 feet into the air. They're huge, right? And when you hear it, it's so loud because it's just so big, right? And so I remember, in the middle of the night being awakened by the sound of the blows, and I knew that they were there, and you could hear the big blow and then the slightly smaller one from the calf, right? And so there I am sleeping on the beach, and this particular mother whale and calf stayed right offshore in the area for hours and hours and hours. So sunrise came and there they were, and they stayed and they stayed and they stayed. And it was just absolutely magical. We were on land. We just, waded into the water just a little bit just to kind of be in the same water that they were in, right? But yeah, they have a very particular energy that to me feels, I don't know if this will make sense to you or not, but like that level of awareness and consciousness that the blue whales in particular hold is so vast. It's just, it's big like their bodies, right? Big like their awareness of the ocean, their lives as they travel through the depths, right? I mean, it's really, again, it's really hard to describe in words. It's
Yeah, I haven't been with blue whales, but I can only imagine what that's like. I communicated with the whales, but it was the group of whales together. It wasn't
Mhm,
individual species, but what they shared with me was they talked a lot about the void, that they're so immersed in the void, which I would equate to spirit, to
mhm.
consciousness, the broader consciousness. So with those enormous bodies, it must be so spacious. I just can't even imagine what that's like.
Yeah, and one of the things I have come to understand from whales of different species, there's been a commonality. And I'd be curious to know if this is something about what you were understanding in talking about the
Yeah.
void and that connection with
Yeah.
spirit, is that there's not a separation. Sometimes in our human world, in our human minds, there's a separation between our physical lives, our physical bodies, and then spirit, right? And with the whales, it's like, no, it's both and. We are fully whale. We are fully in our whale lives, doing our whale things, whatever those are, at any point in time, raising our young, mating, feeding, migrating, doing all of the things that we're doing. And always with this complete fluid connection with spirit and with all of the multidimensional realms of spirit um you're the word that you use, the void, is that what you were understanding they were meaning
Yeah.
by that? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. They
yeah.
live in that space
They live
like
in
we
that.
all do, but they're
Yes.
so immersed in it and so conscious
Yeah,
of it that it's like we don't quite understand that. We can't be in both worlds as easily as they are, but it's just like you're describing. It's just who they are, you
yeah.
know.
And it's always present. It's not ever on and off. It's always present, and it's not either or. It's both and. We're fully present in our physical lives, and we're fully present in our connection to all of all of everything that is.
What comes to my mind is the expression that we're spirits inhabiting human bodies. But and that's who they are. They're spirits inhabiting a whale body, but like you said, there's not the separation that we
Right.
feel.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that I've understood from them is that their species consciousness is also not limited, um, in that they have access to the memories and the experiences of their species and of their ancestors and of all of those who have come before in the physical, uh, in their physical world, right? And as such, they also have access, and I've heard this from whales of different species, but that there is access then to that knowledge of of not just what their the knowledge of their species, but the knowledge of the earth that comes through that, the knowledge of the oceans, the knowledge of the planet, really, because they've been here for a lot longer than we have, right? And that knowledge of that vast, almost like the history, the records of the earth, the records of their species. They have access to that, and it's encoded in their language, in their species language, but it's also encoded in their consciousness, and it's something that they carry and they can and often do communicate about. I don't know if that it touches in with some of your experiences with them,
And I
or
also feel like maybe it's not just about the earth, that they have
yes,
kind of a cosmic or universal consciousness.
yes,
They're so in touch with that.
yeah.
It's not limited to anything
Right, right, exactly. And galactic.
galactic.
And yeah, so vast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, so great, Nancy. This is so exciting. Thank you.
Mm.
And
It's so fun to
let me
talk about
hear.
this. It's just so fun. I mean, like I said to you and Avantika when we talked last time, you push the whale button on me, it's hard. There's not really an off switch. So
And I want to hear it all. So tell us about the gray whales in Baja, because those are the ones that many people are used to hearing about, and how you can touch them and kiss them and all that kind of stuff. What about that?
yeah. Yeah, they're known as the friendly gray whales of Baja. And so for people who don't know what about this phenomenon, these are Pacific gray whales. And Pacific gray whales have the longest migration of any whale on the planet. They go from the far Arctic down to uh, these particular whales go to the protected lagoons in Baja California, Mexico. There are three particular areas that they will go that are, again, they're protected, they're warm, they're lagoons, and they come there to give birth to their calves. And they spend the winter months there, and then they migrate back to their feeding grounds in the North Pacific and in the Arctic. And so these lagoons were, during the whaling times, places that the whales would be trapped and hunted and killed. And they were known in those times for being very fierce. The mother whales were very fierce in trying to protect their young. And they would attack the whaling boats. They would fight. They would do everything that they could to try to stop what was happening with the whaling. So it's a place with a really difficult and terrible history from my perspective, in terms of the whaling and the just the what was, just the mass murder of the gray whales in the whaling times. And so after that all stopped, they continued to come to these lagoons, and they would come, it's my understanding from talking a little bit with the scientists who've studied them also, that certain families come, the families of whales come to the same locations every year. So that's something that's passed down through their ancestors and their biology. And so at a certain point in the 1970s, and so the local fishermen would, continue to do their fishing and be in these lagoons, and the whales were there. And at a certain time in the 70s, there was a man who was out fishing, and I happened to meet and be able to stay with the family of this man. His I believe it was his grandsons or maybe his great grandsons who were there at the time that I met them. But he was out fishing, and Mother Whale came with her baby up to the fishing boat, and it was clear that the mother whale was bringing her baby close to this fisherman. And he recognized that this was not something that he needed to be afraid of, but that rather it was this benevolent gesture of an outreach. And he, if I'm remembering the story correctly, at that point, like he was able to make contact with this baby whale and touch this baby whale as the mother brought her baby to the boat. And so that began this behavior. More and more of the whales, the mother whales, started bringing their babies and inviting contact with people. And from what I've understood, that I just find this absolutely astounding, that this behavior started simultaneously in all of the different lagoons down the coast at the same time. In other words, it was a collective behavior that the whales were initiating, and it has continued to this day. And it's not all of them, but certain of them. How I understand it is this real outreach and a mission to humanity, right? Of bridging the gap between our species and healing. I mean, it just makes me want to weep every time I talk about it. Healing the wounds caused by our species during the whaling times. And some of the whales that began to, exhibit and initiate this behavior had harpoon scars still in their bodies, right? And so not only were the memories of those times alive in their collective understanding and their ancestral awareness and consciousness, but many of them, because they lived very long lives, right? They had been alive during those times, during the end of those whaling times. And so they knew, right? And yet they collectively, as a species, particular individuals at the same time began making these connections with humans. And and so it's continued now. And of course, there are scientists there who are researching, and there are local people now who have an ecotourism, business, who, will bring people out on these very small boats. And, again, it's very, especially in the place that I've spent the most time is San Ignacio Lagoon, which is one of the more remote places, and you have to, yeah, it takes some doing to get there, and you have to kind of plan to spend a few days there at least. But it's very well regulated, very protected, and and the operators, the people who take the visitors out in the boats are generally have had long relationships and connections with these whales through their families and because they live there, right? And this is, they're out with them all the time. And so it is, again, it's just extraordinary because the whales can do whatever they're going to do, right? And yet they choose, the ones that choose. It could not be more clear. They bring, they come to the boats, they bring their babies, and the babies and sometimes the mother whales come right up alongside the boat. And they love it. They just, you can see they get so excited, right? And of course, people just are beyond, excited, right? I mean, it's just an amazing thing. And they love to have their, to have their faces stroked and sometimes to have their baleen stroked, right? And they'll come and just stay over and over and over again. And then sometimes at a certain point, the moms will say, okay, it's time, we're gonna go do something else now, right? But it's, this understanding. I remember I had one mother whale communicate to me one of the years that I was there that her mother had done this with her when she was a baby. And this was part of her lineage. She is one of the ones who is bringing, making this continued relationship and connection with humans and bringing her baby the way that her mother had brought her in this just incredible. I mean, I think of it as missionary work to the humans, right? This incredible outreach of love and also understanding, and I would use the word forgiveness
Yeah.
of okay, we're going to do this differently. We're going to cultivate a different relationship with your kind and between our species. And it's just absolutely astounding to be in that energy and to be with these beings who are so clearly aware of what it is that they're doing.
If only humans could actually learn from them about compassion and forgiveness,
Yeah,
wouldn't our world be totally different? I
yeah,
think they're doing their best to teach us.
yeah, exactly,
Oh,
exactly. And to teach us over and over again in so many ways, right? And to continue to show up and continue to try to help us and also to make relationship,
yeah.
right? Um, yeah,
Whoa, amazing. Just amazing.
yeah.
Speaking of interacting with the animals in the water, thinking about the dolphins who I
Hmm.
adore. They were my first teachers.
Yeah.
And I have not been to Bimini. I've thought about it for a very long time. I've been to Hawaii a number of times and Costa Rica, but Bimini is like, isn't that another protected, safe place to be in the water with the dolphins? Whereas Hawaii, now I've been in the water with dolphins in Hawaii. Now there's strict regulations where you
Right.
can't be too close to the dolphins in the water because so many people abuse this privilege,
Right.
and
Right.
they antagonize the animals and they don't give them space. But in Bimini, isn't it different with the spotted whales? The spotted,
Yeah, with this Atlantic spotted dolphins, so we're not talking about, because in the Bahamas, unfortunately, there are also a lot of captive dolphin experiences, which I
in Bimini?
I think not so much in Bimini, but in other places in the
Yeah,
Bahamas, there are dolphins who are in captivity. But I want to be clear that that's not what we're talking about here.
right,
Um,
right. Good point. Yeah,
that the dolphins that I'm talking about in Bimini are the Atlantic spotted dolphins that are wild dolphins. And they have been, again, interacting with and choosing to be with humans for decades. And so there's also, there's researchers there who are studying them, and they, they have a large area where they like to hang out that is off off the coast of the island of Bimini. And and so, again, it's a wonderful experience because they get to choose. They get to choose where they are and what they want to do. And they're very aware of humans and know them and, have been choosing to interact and be with and swim with humans for, a long, long time. And so again, it's just magical because of course it's beautiful, it's warm and it's, a lot easier to be in the water with them than it is in some of the places where the water's cold and you have to wear wetsuits and all the things. But again, when they come and when they choose to be with you, it's just this incredible blessing of being with these magnificent beings who are, again, we could just go on and on about who they are, what they know, what they understand, right? And, I found, especially with these dolphins, the times that I've been with them, they're so fluent with telepathic communication, right? That's their, and so I'm thinking of one time I was with there were several dolphins in the area, and I was with this group. I think it was three or four that were just traveling together with me and swimming with me. And I, tend to swim on one side so that I can, keep my snorkel up and then face them, right? And so we can kind of swim along side to side. And I was on the side that they were on was not the same side that my snorkel was on. And so I was having a little bit of a hard time. I'm a pretty good swimmer and I'm an experienced snorkeler, so I was able to manage it. But I just, telepathically said to them, this would be a lot easier for me if we could turn and go the other way. And within a split second, that's exactly what they did. We just turned, like all of us turned. We went the other way. I was more comfortable because I had the snorkel on the right side. I could breathe well. And, there they were. And we just swam along together and just hung out like that. I mean, it was just this matter. It was instant. They got the communication and it changed just like that. It was, it was just so fun. I was like, thank you,
That's so great.
just thank you. And I've had them also come up to me, and they do that amazing thing with their sonar where they come, and for me, they've done it a couple times just at my heart center, right? Where they just come right up and then it's just that, with the sonar, but right at the heart chakra. And it's just, unexplainable. I mean, it's just incredible.
So, Nancy, what do you think about the energy, the spirit of the dolphins versus the big whales? What do you think about that? How are they similar? How are they different?
There's a similarity in the level of awareness and the level of consciousness. I consider all of them to be advanced beings who are teachers, are evolutionary leaders, are teachers, right? And in a certain way, the dolphins, it's like they bring that energy and it becomes, when we talk about the whales, we've been talking about just this vast, expansive awareness of consciousness, right? And with the dolphins, one of the ways that I experience is they bring that vast awareness of consciousness, and then they kind of funnel it in and bring it in a way that is maybe easier for people to initially receive or have. And there's also this level of playfulness and joy with the dolphins that is very particular energy to them. It's not that other, the whales of other species don't have joy and play. They absolutely do. But there's a particular way, at least this has been true with the dolphins I've been with, where they bring that in with such beautiful awareness and such consciousness. And the understanding, one of the things I've learned from them is that feeling of play and joy is itself one of the highest vibrational frequencies that we can engage in. That frequency of play and joy is a really high spiritual expression of consciousness and awareness.
Oh, that's so true. And so many of us get caught up in daily life and we're so serious all the time.
Right,
They don't live that way.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Ah, that's so
Mhm.
great. I think when I think of dolphins, I think of joyfulness,
Yeah,
just always. Yeah.
yeah.
What are you doing now that you're not going on these beautiful adventures? What are you about now?
Well, I'm not ruling out the beautiful adventures, but I've just been on pause on that for a while. And I'm doing a lot of teaching. Most of my work now is teaching. I have a interspecies communication training program, for that's open to anybody who wants to learn more about this. And in addition to that, there are people who come to study with me who also want to be professional animal communicators. And so I have a training program for them as well. And that's a intensive, pretty much a 2 or more year training program for people who want to study. So I'm doing a lot of teaching, some teaching travel, but more locally here in the United States, and doing my work with to have a limited amount of time that I am available for consultations, but I'm still doing some consultations, and then just really loving being here in northern New Mexico, my home, and being with my own animals and the land here, the mountains and the rivers and everything that's here. So that's been a lot of my focus in the last years is staying a little bit
Oh,
closer to home. And
yeah, that's great though. I can only imagine your classes are really, really good and powerful and sweet. Very
um,
sweet.
yeah. I
Thank
really do love teaching, and I love helping people to really awaken to their own ability to do this. And I know you and I are on the same page with this, that this is not something that only people like you and me do. This is something that everybody, it's a universal language. Everybody has access to this way of being and to communicating and connecting. And I love helping people to rediscover that and to be able to find their own way in connecting with
Yeah.
animals and trees and plants and all life.
There's a certain thrill that happens. I know we've talked about this when somebody gets it and they get this profound message for the first time. It's so exciting,
Yeah,
huh? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Nothing like it.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we go?
Just, for if there's somebody who's listening for whom this is new, uh, there's a lot of resources available. So now more than any other time, probably, there's a lot of different places that you can find out about this, including on this podcast, right? So, if it interests you, if it's sparking something for you, I just, I encourage people to really follow that and follow that connection with their heart and follow the animals and the other beings because they're our teachers and they once people start to wake up, then the animals just go, oh, wow, okay, and so we can ask for their help. And, more, almost always, they're so willing. They're so willing to help us learn, to help us understand, to help us reconnect in this way and kind of I think of welcoming us back into the web of life because our species is the only species that has, taken ourselves apart and done something else. And it's time for us to come back in. And the more of us that do that, the more of us that really relate to each other as fellow sentient beings in partnership here on this planet, that has the potential to make shifts and changes, whether in the physical world or in the energetic world or in the spiritual world, that are beyond what we might be able to see right now through our limited lens of perception.
Yeah, exactly. So where can people find you if they want more?
My website is the best place, nancywindheart.com. And
Okay.
I'm limiting my social media at this point. That might change at some time in the future, but for now, that was a decision I've made recently to just pull my energy out of that and focus. I do have a YouTube channel, so people can find me there also. But other than that, through my website is the best place to connect and learn
Well,
more.
great. Thank you so much, Nancy. This has been so much fun for me. I've just loved hearing all your stories and the wisdom you've gained. And oh my gosh, it's just so wonderful. And I just really appreciate you and the incredible work that you're doing. You've,
Mm.
I just know you've changed so many lives, human, animal, whatever, just from who you are. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that so much, Barbara. It's just that touches my heart, and I feel the same. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And I love everything that you're doing, you and Avantika together, and you in your writing, and all of the ways that you share. And so wonderful to be able to connect this way as colleagues and as just fellow travelers on this journey, because
Yeah.
it's wow, what a privilege we have to
Yeah.
be here now. So thank you.
Yes.
It means a lot to me.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I feel exactly the same. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. And before we close, we're going to have a short blessing for the animals. We'd like to end this podcast by taking just a moment to be quiet. And we give thanks and blessings to these amazing animals that we share our lives with. They give us so much and ask for so little in return. We hope that you can keep the animals and all living beings in your heart and in your mind as you go about your day. Thank you so much for being here with us today.